Okay, we're starting the Gemara on the bottom of the Afayin Test Summit Bays. What we learned over here in the Gemara is it brings a few statements, three statements in the name of Sabi the Pumpadisa, the elders of Pumpadisa, which was Rav Yehuda and his yeshiva, as Rashi says. So the Gemara here brings one more statement that also comes from Sabi the Pumpadisa. Amar Ameimer, Ha Nami Sabi the Pumpadisa Amrino. The following was also said by the elders of Pumpadisa. The Itmar, we learned, Ezehi Ashere Stam. How do we know to assume that it is a tree that's an Ashere, that's an Avodah Zarah tree? So Rashi says, we're talking about a case where we don't see anybody actually serving it as an Avodah Zarah, so then it's obvious. But without that, how do we know that it's an Ashere tree? Amarav, so Rav says, Kol Shekoimrin Shemrin Maisa. Only if you see that there are priests that are guarding it, and they don't eat from its fruits. So then you know that because they're using it as an Avodah Zarah, so therefore they're not using it and they're guarding it. Shmuel says that's not enough. Kagoin the Omri Hanitmari l'Shichra de Bei Nitzrifi. They say clearly that this tree is going to be used for the dates, that to make beer out of it for Bei Nitzrifi, which is an Avodah Zarah. The Shasale b'yoy midam, and they drink this beer on the day of their holidays. So it's not just enough that they guard it, but it has to be something that it's clear that they're using the fruits of the tree for their Avodah Zarah. Amru li Sabi de Pumpadisa, so Ameimer says, now the elders of Pumpadisa told me, Hilchase kavase de Shmuel, that we paskin like Shmuel. Now the Gemara comes back to what we were speaking about before, and that is beneged to making a Eruv Chatzeris or a Shituf Mavois. So what did it say in the Gemara before? That a person takes the food that he has, and he's mezaket to everybody else. And what did it say? When you're mezaket to everybody else, what do you have to do? You have to lift it up a tefach. So the Gemara brings a question on this. Meisvei, we learned in the Braise, Keitzad mishtatvim b'mavoi, meviyin, chavis shal yayin. So a person brings a barrel of either wine, shal shemen or oil, shal tmarim, dates, shal groigeris, figs, shal shamine peiris, im mishaloi. If this is all his, tzarech lezakis. So he has to be mezaket to the other people that are included in this shituf mavais. Vim mishalahen. If he's taking from their food, then tzarech la'idiyah, he has to let them know. Can't take it without letting them know, right? So if you're taking from your own food, so then you're just doing them a favor by including them in the shituf mavais. Mashenken, if you're taking from their food, so Rashi here says sometimes a person is makpid. You take his food without its permission. Rashi says einay tzara ba'yisei pas. He doesn't want you to use it, so therefore you're going to have to let him know. And you lift it up when you're mezakeh to them. You have to lift it up from the ground a mashu. So the question is, before we said a tefach, answers the Gemara, my mashu nami de ka'amar tefach. The expression of mashu over here does not mean like it usually does, which is just a mashu, whatever it is, which means nothing, no amount. Mashu means a tefach. So this is a source you find over here from this Gemara, that the expression of mashahu in Chazal and in Halacha, sometimes mashahu does not mean mashahu, which is no shear. Over here we see that mashahu could also mean a certain shear. There's a whole Sicha Barichas about this, a Chelik Chavtes, where the Rebbe talks about this inyan, that sometimes a kol shahu, the term kol shahu is used in Gemara and Paiskim in two different contexts. Sometimes it's used to say that there is no shear, but sometimes kol shahu is used in a context to say the smallest shear. Over here we see in the Gemara that it says mashahu, and mashahu means a shear. It means a shear of a tefach. Sagt the Gemara weiter, itma, we learned the machlokes. Shitufei muvois. You're making the shituf and the mavois for the people. Rav Omar, ein tzarech lezakis. Rav actually is arguing here with the Mishnah. Rav says you don't have to be mezaket to anybody. You take your own food and you put the food for those people, and it's good enough without being mezaket to anybody. Why don't you have to be mezaket? You don't have to make a kinyan to be mezaket to anybody. So Rashi Taisus explain over here, the reason is because the hana that you have, that you're including them in the Eruv Chatzeris, that now you could carry. If you don't make an Eruv Shituf Mavois, that is, we're talking about Shituf Mavois, and the same thing as Eruv Chatzeris. If you don't make this Eruv Chatzeris or Shituf Mavois with them, so you can't carry. You're having hana from this more than anyone else, or just as much as anyone else. So because of the hana, we know that it's your intention to be mezakeh to them, and you don't have to be mezakeh beferish. Shmuel says no, tzarech lezakis. You have to make a kinyan, like it said in the Mishnah. You have to pick it up a tefach, or you have to be mezakeh. Yeah, mezakeh, the lashon of the Mishnah. That's beneged to Eruv Chatzeris. Eruv Tchumen, beneged to an Eruv Tchumen. if you're making an Erev Tchumen for someone else, Rav Omar, Tzarech L'Zakais. Rav says, over here you have to be Mizakeh to that person. You don't have any benefit from this. You have to be Mizakeh to him. Shmuel Omar, Ein Tzarech L'Zakais. Shmuel says, no, Dafke by Erev Tchumen, you don't have to be Mizakeh to anybody. By an Erev Tchumen, we say that automatically the whole point of the Erev Tchumen is to create a dira for that person there. So let's say he doesn't own that food. If you're putting it there and having in mind another person, that creates the shvisa, the dira for the person over there. Or an other, that's what Taisus here says. Other Rishonim say that by Erev Tchumen, the other person must have told you to go and do this. What we're talking about by Erev Tchumen is he asked you to go and put it there. So therefore, when you put it there, even without you being mizakeh to him, he made you a shliach to go and do it, it'll be a good Erev Tchumen. Fragt the Gemara, Shmuel's opinion is understood, what the source of his opinion is. Hachatnan, here we have a Mishnah. It says beferish that you have to be mizakeh for Erev Chatzeris. And v'hachaloitnan, there's no Mishnah that says so by Erev Tchumen. So therefore by Erev Tchumen we say you don't have to be mizakeh. Elul Rav, my time, but according to Rav, what's his reasoning? He's saying opposite of what it said in our Mishnah. And Dafka by Erev Tchumen, when it never says that you have to be mizakeh, there he holds you have to be mizakeh. Answers the Gemara, Tanoihi. Rav holds that it's a machlokes Tanoim. And the Gemara brings the story. There was a story with the daughter-in-law of Rabbi Ishia. Erev Shabbos, she went to a bathhouse, and it became dark. Shabbos came in, and it was too far for her to walk back. So now she's out of the tchum. Her mother-in-law came and made an Erev Tchumen for her. And the question was, Rabchia was asked the question, her mother-in-law made an Erev Tchumen for her, would that work or not? And V'asar, and Rabchia says, no, it doesn't work. It's not good. Amalei Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yesi asked Rabchia, Bavloi, Rabchia from Bavel, Kol kach ata machme, this was a story that happened in Eretz Yisrael, he called him Bavloi, Kol kach ata machme be'Eiruvin, you're so machme with Eiruvin that she can't rely on this Erev Tchumen of her mother-in-law. Kach Omar Abba, didn't Abba, which is Rav, said, Kol sheyesh lecha lahakol be'Eiruvin hakol. Whatever you can be mekel b'negeh to Eiruvin, you should be mekel. So why are you being so machme? So, l'chayre, this is the story, the source where you see that because her mother-in-law made the Erev Tchumen, so she can't rely on it. So over here you see that you have to be mezakeh. Her mother-in-law was not mezakeh. The Gemara now explains. The Gemara brings it actually first as an ibaya. V'ibaya lohu. Now the question was asked, Mishel chamaisa irvala. When she made the Erev Tchumen, did she use her own food? Her mother-in-law used her own food. The reason why Rabchia said it's not a good Erev Tchumen was because her mother-in-law was not makne the food for her daughter-in-law. She actually made the Erev Tchumen from the food that belonged to her daughter-in-law. That wasn't the issue. But we said before that if you're using somebody's food, you have to let them know. And over here, the mother-in-law didn't let it. It wasn't with her permission. That's why it didn't take effect. Which one is it? Rav Yaakov came and told them, I was explained about this story and about this psak of Rabchia in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. The issue was that she took her own food. The mother-in-law used her own food. She didn't have to have permission. But the issue was that she wasn't mezakeh the food for her daughter-in-law. So here we see the source that Rabchia also says, like Rav said, that by Erev Tchumen you have to be mezakeh the food to the person you're making the Erev Tchumen for. Amalei Rab Zeire, Rab Yaakov, Berei, the Bas Yaakov. Rab Zeire said to Rab Yaakov, which was the son of the daughter of Yaakov. Rashi here says that Aviv Lehoya Hagen, his father, they didn't mention his father's name because he wasn't Hagen, so they say that he was the son of the daughter of Yaakov. Kimatis Hasam, when you go to Eretz Yisrael, Akif, Zil, the Sulma, the Tzur, go around and go to this place where there's the Sulam of Tzur, a pathway by Tzur, and that's the place where he was living. Yaakov Bar Idi, ask Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi that knows about the story, ask him what the story was. So he asked him this question. Mishel Chamaisa in that story, that did the mother-in-law use her own food? The reason why the Erev Tchumen didn't work is because the mother-in-law was not mezakeh the food to the daughter-in-law. Or the issue was that true, the mother-in-law used her food, but he didn't get permission from her. That was the issue. Amalei, and Rav Yaakov Beredi answered, Mishel Chamaisa Irvala, or Mishum Deloi Zichsala. The issue was that she used her own food, the mother-in-law used her own food, and she wasn't mezakeh the food to her daughter-in-law, and that's why the Eid of Tchumen could not be used. So this is the source for what Rav said, that you have to be mezakeh by Eid of Tchumen. Then you get to the other case though, this that Rav says that by Eid of Chatzeris you don't have to be mezakeh, that the Gemara never brings the source for, and the Rishonim say that Rav Tanahu Palig. Rav argues on a Mishnah. When he said before Tanoihi, it means that Rav himself is a Tana and he argues on a Mishnah and he holds that you don't have to be mezakeh.
Mezakeh meaning to be maknet.
To make a kinyan, to make an actual kinyan, to pick it up at tefach, yeah.
For them.
Right. You don't have to be mezakeh, you just put the food there, you put it down there, having them in mind, it's good enough without making an actual kinyan.
I had her in mind.
Huh?
Mezakeh is more than having in mind.
Yeah, right. Mezakeh means you have to pick it up at tefach, what we said before. You make a kinyan by picking it up at tefach. Yeah, correct, true. But you have to actually make a kinyan. That's what our Mishnah said. Rav says you don't have to make the kinyan. You don't have to make you don't have to be mezakeh. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, what's the halacha? Naktinon. The psak din b'poyel is echad eiruvei tchumen, whether you're making an eid of tchumen for someone, ve'echad eiruvei chatzeris, whether you're making an eid of chatzeris for someone, echad shitufim mivois, or you're making the shituf in the mavoi, tzarech lezakais. You do have to make a kinyan to be makna to food to someone if it's not his food. Okay? So, it's interesting, even though usually when it comes to the machlokesen, when you get to Eiruvin, we're mekel, but over here, Rav Nachman paskin, in all of these cases, that you have to be machmer. By Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman asks a question, how about Eiruvei Tafshilin? By Eid of Tafshilin, if you're making the Eid of Tafshilin and you're also having in mind other guests and people that are going to come to your house, Tzarech Lezakai, he says, hey, ain't Tzarech Lezakai. Do you have to be Mezakeh, the Eid of Tafshilin, for other people or not? Amar Rav Yosef, Umay Tibayele. Why are you asking this question? Leishmile ha Amar Rav Nachman bar Rav Ada Omar Shmuel. Didn't you hear what Rav Nachman bar Rav Ada said in the name of Shmuel? Eiruvei Tafshilin Tzarech Lezakais. That even by an Eid of Tafshilin you do have to be mezakeh, like we do when we say the nusach of Eid of Tafshilin, Hareni mezakeh. So didn't you hear what Shmuel said? Amalei Abaye Pshite Deloi Shmiele. For sure he didn't hear this statement in the name of Shmuel. That's why he had a question. The Ishmiele Mai Tibayele. If he would have heard, why would have he had any question about this? Amalei, so he said, what do you mean? He would have had a question. Otu Eiruvei Tchumen Mila Yoma Shmuel Ein Tzarech Lezakais. By Eid of Tchumen, so Shmuel also said something about it. Shmuel said that you don't have to be mezakeh. V'amar iyu Tzarech Lezakais. And Rav Nachman still didn't paskin like Shmuel. Rav Nachman paskin that you do have to be mezakeh. So what do you see? That not necessarily did he hold that you paskin like Shmuel. So maybe when he get to Eid of Tafshilin, maybe he heard what Shmuel said, that you have to be mezakeh, but maybe he held you don't paskin like Shmuel. Amalei, so Rav Yosef says, no. Otu Eiruvei Tchumen, Miloi Ama Shmuel. Sorry, I just went up a line, sorry. So the Gemara says, Hochi Hashta. Gemara says you can't compare. Bishloi Mahasam, Pligi, Rav, or Shmuel. Before, when we were talking about Eid of Chatzeres, Eid of Tchumen, there was a machlokes about this. It wasn't only Shmuel, there was Rav and Shmuel. V'kamash Shmuelon, kechumer in the mar, v'chichumer in the mar. And Rav Nachman held that we paskin l'chumre, both like Rav's chumre and like Shmuel's chumre, that you always have to be mezakeh. Aval hacha, I isa de Shmiele. If Rav Nachman would have heard what Shmuel said, that by Eid of Tafshilin you have to be mezakeh, miyikid demand the polik. Is there anybody that argued on him? Rav, nobody argued on what Shmuel said, so therefore he would have never had the question. So it must be that he didn't hear what Shmuel said. But now that we know what Shmuel said, we paskin like Shmuel, that by Eid of Tafshilin, you also have to be mezakeh for the other people, your guests and other people that are going to be included in this Eid of Tafshilin. Zok the Gemara, Hahu Turzina. There was a guy, which was a Turzina. Turzina, Rashi says, is like a Memunah Klizayin, I guess some kind of a security guard. The Have b'shvivuse de Rab Zera. He was living in the neighborhood of Rab Zera. Amalei, so the people that were living, the Yidden that were living with him in his chotzer, said to him, Oiger lan reshusach. Rent us your reshus, as we learned before. In order to be able to make an Eid of Chatzeres with a guy, you have to rent the reshus from him. Lo yoigelu, he wasn't interested. He didn't want to rent him his reshus. Also, came and asked Rab Zera, Amrulei, Ma'ule mega midebisu. Maybe we can rent his reshus from his wife. We don't have to rent it from him himself. Amar lahu, so he said, yeah, hachi amar Reish Lakish, Shmei de Gavre Rabbe. Reish Lakish said in the name of a great person, Umana Rab Chanina, and this was Rab Chanina, Ishtoi shel Adam me'areves shaloi midaitoi. A person's wife could be mizake and erev chatzeris shaloi midaitoi, and the same thing over here, benegeh to the renting of the reshus from the goy, that a person's wife could be mizake, you can rent it shaloi midaitoi. So the reason, if you look in Taisvis, Taisvis says Ishte kegufay, the Rishayim at Taisvis, and Taisvis doesn't bring up and a chanami. No, but true. No, but it's not that. That's because Ishte kegufay. So therefore, the food that's there in this chatzah, she can give over and say that, or she can give over the usage. The idea is that she gives over the usage of the rental of this place to the people. And the Taisus, the discussion in Taisus actually is whether this is Dafka Isha or even other people from the family. Right? So Taisus says that the two bottom lines of Taisus, if the Baal, the Isha, they're both not here, so the Bnei Bayis could also give over without the reshus of the father, the mother. They can give over the usage of the reshus, the schiris reshus, to whoever has to get it. Yeah.
That's by Yid, but by a goy, you can't say shush on a goy.
The what?
The goy, the husband doesn't want.
So the interesting thing is, you're right. It's a big chiddush. So it says befeirish in the Rishayim and the Paiskim that this whole thing is taka a big kula, because over here we're talking in a case even when the husband is saying befeirish ich will nicht. So Mela, the husband is not here, like Taisa says, he's out of town. It's one thing. But if he's here and he's screaming, I don't want, we still allow the wife to do it instead of him. What's the pshat? So the Rishayim say, it's a kula, because they know that sometimes it's going to be impossible otherwise. The whole din of Erev Chatzeris is a takon of Chazal, it's a chumr of Chazal. So they will make all that you can rely on the schiris reshus of the wife. Can't rely on anybody. It has to be someone that's connected to this house. So who is it? Ishtoi or the Bnei Bayis, even if it's Heipach Ritzaynai. It's a special kula they made. That was one story. A similar story the Gemara brings again. Hahu Turzina, the Have B'Shavusei, that Rav Yehuda bar Oishia. This security guard that was living by Rav Yehuda in the neighborhood of Rav Yehuda bar Oishia. Amri lei oigelon reshusok. They asked him to rent out his reshus to them. Lei oigelu, he wasn't interested. Also, like I made Rav Yehuda bar Oishia. Amri lei, they asked him the same question. Ma'ala megam edebisu. Could we rent it from your wife? Lei have biyode. He didn't have the answer. Also l'kamei Rav Masna, have biyode. He also didn't know the answer. Also l'kamei Rav Yehuda. They came to Rav Yehuda. Amar lahu. He said, Hachi Yom Shmuel. Shmuel already said this. Ishtoi shel Adam me'areves shaloi midaitoi. A person's wife could make the eruv even without the knowledge of the husband. Meisvei. Gemara asks on this. It says in the Braise, Noshim she'irvu v'nishtatfu shaloi midas ba'aleyen. A wife that makes this, that participates with native chatzeris, not with the knowledge of the husband. Ein Eiruvin Eirov, ein shituf and shituf. So it's not a good Eirov and it's not a good shituf. So how can we say that you can rely on the wife? Answers the Gemara like Kashya. Ha the osar, ha the loy osar. If you have a situation where a person is in a chatzer, and without him participating in the Erev Chatzeris, he's going to ask it on everybody else. So then the wife, we are makel that the wife could do it without the husband, or even against the husband's will. But the loy asar means if you have a house which is between two Chatzeris, and this house, not necessarily there's an asar on this Chatzer. He could walk out from the other side, and then he's not part of this Chatzer. So lav dafki is even part of this Chatzer. So in such a case, if the wife decides that I want to be part of this chatzar and I'm going to make the eruv together with them, that we can't rely on, because it's not needed. We don't have to be makel here. You could just walk out from the other side and you won't be part of this chatzar. It's logical to say that this is the pshat here, the imkain, because if not so, kashye the Shmuel ad Shmuel. There would be a contradiction in Shmuel's own opinion. Shmuel said, Echad mibnei mavoi sheragol ishtatif im bnei mavoi. What if there's a person from this mavoi that usually is mishtatif with the aid of chatzeris of the mavoi? In other words, he walks out usually in this place and he has to be mishtatif with them. V'lo nishtatif. And he was not mishtatif with this person. B'nei hamavi nechnasen l'toich beisai, v'neitlen shitufam mimeno bal karchai. So the people of the mavi could go and force him to be mishtatif in the shituf mavais, even against his will. Once he gave his consent once, and he was always mishtatif, even if one time he wasn't mishtatif, they can go and do it against his will. So what do you see over here? Ragil in, she'ein ragil loy. So the taich of the Gemara, according to Rashi, is that Iragil, since he always walks out in this place in the Mavui, so he always asers on them, so they're going to have a problem. If he's not going to be Mishtativ, so then they can do it even against his will. But if he's not Iragil, if he doesn't walk out of here, he has another place, or another opening to walk out from, so then they can't. Shema Mina, so we see over here that there's a difference. If this is a person that is going to aser on you, so then you could do it against his will. So the same thing also, we could be makel that his wife could do it for him. But if he doesn't always walk out of here, so then you don't do it through his wife, and you can't force him to do it. There's other pshatim in Rishayim, but that's Rashi and Taisus' pshat over here. So the Gemara weiter, I'll bring your ayah to this. Kaifin oisai. A person that does not want to participate with the people of the Mavui, they have to buy a lechi and a kaira for the Mavui, and he doesn't want to participate. So they can force him, because he's living here, and if he's not going to participate, it's going to be also for everybody, so therefore they can force him to participate. So we see over here, we can learn from this, but I said that says, that the same thing also applies to Shittuf Mavais and Erev Chatzeres. To participate, to make it, they have to buy it. L'mashal, it costs money to buy this lechi and the kaira, or to make it, and they need its help, or they need him to be mishtatif and the money to buy the lechi and the kaira, so they can force him to be mishtatif. Shani Hassam, so the Gemara says no, that case is completely different. Shani Hassam, the leke mechitzis. Over there, it's different because the fourth side is completely open, so therefore they can force him to put up a mechitza, to put up the lechi and the kaira. Rashi says that when you don't have a mechitza, Lashon of Rashi in the beginning of the Amud here, ve'eina noyach l'shoimroi, because it's lacking the shmira that they have exposed, open, the whole place. So maybe the whole idea that you can force is dafke in such an inyan, when you're forcing him to be mishtativ in the shmira. But for Erev Chatzeres, to be able to carry, it's not a place which is exposed. Maybe in such a case you can't force. You can't compare the two cases. Lishna Achrinem, another teretz over here is, if you know if you guide this mitzat shani. Okay, so the Bach takes it out, so we're not going to be guided this. Sagt der Gemara weiter, Itmer, Avchie Barashi Omarav, Oisen Lechi Asherah. We brought up the inyan of a Lechi and a Kaira. The Gemara here says a very fundamental inyan regarding an Lechi. That a Lechi could be made even with taking it from an Avodah Zarah tree, which is Asa Bahana, and you have to burn it. Nevertheless, you can make a Lechi from an Asherah tree. Rab Shimon ben Lakish Amar, Reish Lakish says, Oisin kaira asherah. You could even make the kaira, the crossbeam, could also be made from the asherah. So the Gemara says, Man da ama kaira, the one that says that you can make even the kaira from the Avodah Zarah, kol sheken lechi, most definitely the lechi. Why? When it comes to a lechi, if you remember what we learned in the first Perek, the lechi has no shear, how thick it has to be, how wide it has to be. A kaira has a certain shear. Rashi here brings you the shear. It has to be wide enough that you can put on it a brick that's a tefach. Okay, so it has to have a certain shear. So it's a huge chiddush that you can use an Avodah Zarah tree, which is like it's ksusim mechsas shiyure. It's like it's burnt. It's like it's not. It has no shear. Nevertheless, you can use it for a kaira. It's a tremendous chiddush. Umanda malechi. So the Gemara says, Manda malechi avol kaira loy ksusim mechsas shiyure. The lechi you could use it because it has no shear in the thickness and the width, but a kaira it has no shear b'chlal. So how could you use it? So what's Taka the Pshat in this Gemara? The mandama that says that you could use a kaira even if it's made from Avodah Zarah favas taka. So the Rishayim explain, the Ravid says the reason is because what's the whole point of the kaira? The whole point of the kaira is to create a heker, to create that place, that siman, that you notice that here's Rosh Hashanah and here's Rosh Hashanah. So even if the emes is that it's ksusim mechtas shiyurei, but the heker is there, it doesn't take away from the mitzias that it is a heker. So therefore, you don't need the mitzias of the kaira mamash. You just need the heker of the kaira. The heker of the kaira is there even if it has no shear because it's burnt. Okay? But it has to be a big shear. It has to be a big heker. It has to have that it could be makabel and a riach. But the inyan of ksusim achzat shiyure does not change the heker.
What about that? It's also about na.
The what?
Also about na.
It's not considered having a hana. The kaira, it's like indirectly, this is gaidim that the people now could carry inside the rishus, but you're not having hana from the kaira itself. That's also. You're putting it there, it creates a heker, and now you can carry in the rishus, in the imavoi. When you get to the lechi, there's a shayla that Tosfos here asks that l'chayra, even though it's true that a lechi doesn't have a shear in its width or its thickness, but of course we know that a lechi does have another shear. In the height, the lechi has to be 10 tvachim high. So how could you say it has no shear? So there's a famous Rab Chaim, Al Rambam, where the Reb Chaim, the Ravid over there asks this question also on the Rambam. So Reb Chaim says that the shear of the height of the lechi is not a din in the lechi itself, that the lechi has a shear. The shear of the height of the lechi is mitzad the mokim that's inside. When you have an enclosure of 10 tfachim, of a mechitza of 10 tfachim, so that creates a mokim inside, that this is a place that's enclosed. If it's a mechitza that's less than 10 tfachim, the place inside is not designated. It's not separated from outside. In order to create a designated area separated from outside, you have to have at least a separation of 10 tfachim. So it's not pshat that there's actually a din of a shear for this mitzias. It's a din mitzad the mokim to create that separation. Umemela, the lechi itself mitzad atzma doesn't have a gather of a shear b'chlal. B'poil, there is that separation that this is a mokim. So similar vart, it's different. It's a similar vart, but it's be'ikib to create what's inside, not that the lechi itself has a shear. So therefore, it doesn't matter if it's avodah zarah. Okay, trachte with the vart. This is a famous vart from Reb Chaim with the singing of the lechi. Sagt the Mishnah, Nismaye ta'oichel, going back to Erev Chatzeres. Nismaye ta'oichel, what's if the food that you put there for the Erev Chatzeres was less than what's in the beginning? Maisif umezake. So you have to add food. So if you're adding from your own food, so then you have to be mezake to them. If you're taking from other people's foods, from the people of the chatzah, you don't have to let them know about this. They already gave their consent in the beginning, so now that you're adding food from their food, you don't have to let them know. And if more people came into the chatzah that never gave their consent to be included in the Erev Chatzeres, maisif umezake. So then you have to add food for them, and you have to also be mezakeh to them. And if you're taking from their food, v'tzarech la'idiyah, you have to let them know that you're using their food because this is the first time that they are making the Erev Chatzeres with you.
When is this happening? After in Yom Tov?
No. On Shabbos. On Shabbos. The difference is if it's the first time, you have to let them know. If it's not the first time, so then you don't have to let them know. What is the shear for Erev Chatzeres? Bizman shehem merubin. When there's a lot of people, mazayin shtei sudas lekulam. Yeah, an amount of food of 2 sudas for everybody. That's if there's a lot of people. The Gemara is going to explain what says a lot of people. Bizman shehem muatim. If there's a little bit of people, kegroigeris l'chol echad ve'echad. There has to be a shear of a kegroigeris, the size of a fig, for every person that's being mishtatif in the Erev Chatzeres. Rabbi Yosi says, Bamed dvarim amurim b'tchilas Eruv. This is only in the beginning of the Eruv, so then there's a shear of how much you have to have. Avol b'shiyarei Eruv. If the Eruv was eaten up, part of it, and there's only leftovers of the Eruv, kol shu, there's no shear. It's enough that you have a kol shu, that's good enough. Okay, so so Rabbi Yosi is arguing the Tanakam, exactly. The Tanakam said you have to be Maisif, you have to be Mezake, you have to be Maidia maybe. Rabbi Yosi says no, we had this before already, that if you have leftovers from the Eruv, even a kol shu is good enough.
This is how we pass it, I think.
Yeah. V'lo yomru, and Rabbi Yosi explains the pshat. This is also a hemshech of Rabbi Yosi's opinion over here. And the Bacht says not villoy loy because it's a hemshech. Loy omru la'arev b'chatzeiros. The whole reason that we make an eirov in chatzeiros is kidei shelo l'shakech esatinoikis. So the children, the next generation, should not forget about eirov chatzeiros. We had this before by MS. In chatzeiros, you have a mavo. You're making the shit of mavois. The shit of mavois should be good enough already to cover also the chatzeiros. They're all being mishtatif together. So Rabbi Yosi holds that you don't even need an Erev Chatzeres once you made already a shit of Mavais. Right? Elamai, the whole union of Erev Chatzeres is that the future generations should not forget about the union of Erev Chatzeres. So therefore we were makel and we say that even if there's a kol shul left over, it's still good enough.
When is it in the middle of Yom Tov? In the middle of Shabbos?
No, for the next week. For the next Shabbos. Yeah.
Good, we just learned that he makes it also. There's in the sense of the Urim, and he doesn't want to be mishtatif on Yom Tov, right?
Can make it also.
On Shabbos itself.
Okay, that's we're not over here. This Mishnah is not talking about any changes in middle of Shabbos. When you have changes in middle of Shabbos, not so pashut. There's different cases. In a lot of cases, you say that whatever was in the beginning of Shabbos, that had to remains. And there's other cases where you say that there is a isser that happens in the middle of Shabbos. It's not so pashut. So what are we talking about over here? When the Mishnah over here says that if it's nismayit, so you don't have to be maidia him. right? Because he already gave his consent in the beginning, even though you're using his food. Are we talking about the same min? He already gave us, so he gave matzah. Right? And now there's not enough matzah, and you're taking from this person, from the people of the chatzah, their matzah. If you're taking the same min, my irya nesmayit. Why does the Mishnah say that only if the food is less food and you have to add, so then you don't have to let them know? Afila kolanami. Even if the Eirov is completely gone and you have to completely get new matzah, new food, should also be okay because they already gave their consent for the Eirov. Elo b'shnei minin. So what are you going to say? That what's happening over here is they gave one min of food for the Eirov, and now you want to take from them without their consent another min. So l'chayra filan ismayit loi. Even in a case where the food was minimized, and you just have to add a little bit without their permission, it shouldn't be allowed. Tanya, the Braisa says, if the food for the Eirov is gone, mimin echad, if you want to take from them the same min, ain't tzarech l'idiyah, you don't have to let them know. Mi beis minin, but if it's from two different minim, tzarech l'idiyah, then you do have to let them know. So we see if you're taking, even though you got a consent from them for the Eirov chatzeres from one min, but if it's a different min, you have to let them know.
Let's just let them know.
You have to let them know that you're taking from their food.
If you're taking, they know already.
No, lavdafka. Maybe there's certain food that you could take without letting them know. You have food that belongs to them, but you could take it without letting them know. So Mishnah says, just because the Gemara here, the Braisa here says, because you got from them one kind of food doesn't mean that they're ready to give a different type of food. It's two different meaning. You have to let them know. So the Gemara, two pshatim in the Mishnah. We could say our Mishnah is talking about that you're taking from them the same min of food that they gave the first time. You could say the Mishnah is talking about that you're taking a different min of food. When it says in the Mishnah nismayit, it means nismatmate. Itaka doesn't mean only if the food became less. It means nismatmate means that the food that was there before is gone. And even then, you could take it without their consent. Or we could say that it's two different minim, and it said in the Braisa that by two different minim you have to get there to shus. Kolo shani. In the Braisa Taka said kolo. When the food is completely gone, so it's almost like you're making a new Eirov chatzeres, so then you have to get there to shus for a different min. But if it's nismayit and you're only taking a little bit of food more, even if it's a different min, you don't have to get there to shus. The Mishnah said, there's more people that came into the chatzar, so then you have to add, so you have to be mezakeh to them, or if you're taking from their food, you have to let them know. Amar Rav Shezvi, Amar Rav Chista. Zoi Seimeres, from here I see Chalukin Olav Chaverev al Rabbi Yehuda. That Rabbi Yehuda's friends, which is our Mishnah, are arguing what Rabbi Yehuda said, the Tanan, because later we learned the Mishnah says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Bamed Dvarim Amurim Be'iruvei Chatzeres. Only b'negei Eiruvei Tchumen, sorry. Lamed dvarim amurim be'Eiruvei Tchumen. Only by aid of Tchumen that you have to let know the person that you're using his food for aid of Tchumen. Aval be'Eiruvei Chatzeres, when it comes to aid of Chatzeres, ma'arvim bein ladas or bein shaloi ladas. Aid of Chatzeres, Rabbi Yehuda holds, you don't have to get the consent of the people of the Chatzar for the aid of Chatzeres. So our Mishnah says that you do have to be Meidia. So our Mishnah is arguing. Sagt the Gemara, Pshita, it's obvious, it's clear that it's a machlekes. Why does the Gemara have to say a chiddush, zoisei meres? What's the big chiddush here? And for the Gemara, the Pshita the Chalukin, it's obvious that they're arguing. Answers the Gemara, not necessarily. There would have been a way to answer this. Mao de teime hanimili b'chotze shebein shnei mevoyos. Maybe in our Mishnah, the case that it's talking about, you have to be meidia another person, is a situation similar to what we had before, that a person that's between two mavois, and he doesn't have to necessarily be part of your shittuf mavois. He's in between. He could either be part of one mavoi or he could be part of another mavoi. He doesn't have to be part of your shittuf. So maybe in our Mishnah, because he doesn't have to be part of your shittuf, here you have to let him know, I'm taking from your food. I am including you in our shittuf. But in one chatzir, in one mavoi, maybe in such a case, our Mishnah would agree to Rabbi Yehuda that you don't have to let him know. Kamash Malan. So therefore, Rav Shezvi said in the name of Rav Chista that no, it is an argument in a person in the same chatzir. There's a machlekes whether you have to let him know or not. Kama Hoshi Yurai. No, we paskin that you do have to let him know.
Second, if I'm in my building, what I can see, no, a new person comes in the middle, you have to let him know.
If you're taking food from him, So if you're taking food, actually it's possible. I say it could be we pass. I'm not sure. Could we do pass like Rabbi Yehuda that you don't have to let him know, even if you're taking food from him. But you're making a native chatzeres for someone in your building. You're not taking from his food. You're taking your own matzah. You're being mezaket to him. Right. The whole machlokes over here is in a case where you're taking from his food that you have to let him know that you're using his food. It's a different story. So that's not the way we usually do native chatzeres today.
Right. So
we don't take food.
It's not like this. We don't take from anybody's food.
But derech klal, when we make, no, you don't take a food from another person.
It's like for everyone, even for the place with the Yudin. Even people are going to come there. They should be part of it.
What does it mean you take from his food? It's not a neighbor. I mean, without letting him know.
Right.
No, it's not mit jenem is
no, klal hat
Yeah. Yeah, we assume that he's not makpid, and therefore we. So the last point of the Mishnah was the shear. How much food do you need for Erev Chatzeres? So the Mishnah said it's a difference if there's merubin or muatin. If there's a lot of people, so then 2 sudas for everybody is good enough. Otherwise, you have to have a greigeris for everyone. So the Gemara says, so kama or merubin. What's considered to be a lot of people? Amar Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel, Shmay Nesre b'nei Yadam. 18 people, that's a lot of people. So the Gemara, Shmay Nesre v'suloi, 18. And what's if it's 19, 20? So amen, no. What he means to say is, Mishmay Nesre ve'elech. If you have 18 or more people, that's considered to be a lot of people. So now the question is, what's up is 18? What's this magic number of 18 that dafka then is considered to be a lot of people? It was explained to me in the name of Abba that the reason is as follows. If you can take the food of 2 sudas and divide it amongst the people of the Chatzar, and there won't be enough of a share of a kegreigeris for each person. That's what we consider to be merubin. And then we say v'sagi b'mazon shtei sudas. It's enough to have a mazon of shtei sudas. V'iloi mu'atin. If the mazon shtei sudas could be divided amongst the people, and everyone's going to get a share of kegreigeris, that's going to be called mu'atin. That everyone gets mu'atin. Mu'atininu. Now, from this we understand the shtei sudas havyan shmoina esre greigeres. What's taka the shir of 2 sudas? The shir of 2 sudas is the amount of 18 kegreigeres. That's 2 sudas. So therefore, if you have 18 people over here, so each one gets a kegreigeres. That's called mu'atim. Mashenkin, if you have 18 people or more, so then I say 2 sudas, and even if there's not a kegreigeres for everybody, it's good enough for the Erev Chatzeres.
What's this for? If you have 100 people and no one has...
Everyone gets mamash amashu and the Erev Chatzeres. Okay, it's a good question. Not sure. Yeah. Okay.